Look up at the sky tonight. What do you see? Maybe just stars, clouds, the occasional plane blinking in the distance. But for our ancestors, the sky wasn't just a backdrop to daily life. It was alive, it spoke, it warned. Imagine standing in an open field thousands of years ago, watching the sun vanish in the middle of the day without warning, or seeing a fiery streak tear across the heavens like a dragon's breath. These weren't just rare sights, they were messages from the gods, omens of disaster, signs that the very order of the world was unraveling. Civilizations across the globe, from the Aztecs to the Babylonians, shared one thing in common: a deep, primal fear of the sky. And it wasn't just superstition. What if they were witnessing something real, something we've only begun to understand? Think about the last time you felt truly small under the vastness of the night sky. Now multiply that feeling by 1,000. For ancient cultures, the heavens weren't just beautiful, they were unpredictable, uncontrollable, and often terrifying. A sudden eclipse could plunge the world into darkness, leaving kings to wonder if the gods had abandoned them. A comet's appearance might signal war, famine, or the end of an era. These weren't abstract fears, they shaped empires. The Maya built entire calendars to predict celestial events, hoping to avoid the wrath of the gods. The Norse believed thunder was the sound of Thor's hammer striking down giants. Even today, echoes of these ancient fears linger in our stories, our religions, even our language. But here's the question: what if their legends weren't just myths? What if they were trying to explain something real, something science is only now piecing together? This is a journey into the unknown, a chance to see the sky through the eyes of those who came before us. We'll explore the strange and sometimes chilling events that might have inspired these myths, from colossal solar storms to asteroid impacts witnessed by countless generations. Could the great floods described in cultures worldwide have been triggered by cosmic disasters? Did ancient astronomers record celestial phenomena we're still discovering today? The answers might surprise you, because when you peel back the layers of myth, you find something remarkable. Our ancestors weren't just telling stories. They were preserving memories of events so extraordinary, so earth-shattering, that they became etched into humanity's collective imagination, so settled in. The sky is about to reveal its secrets. The Mesopotamians weren't just telling stories when they described the god Marduk splitting the sky apart. They were documenting what they saw with their own eyes. Clay tablets from 4,000 years ago describe celestial omens so precise that modern astronomers have matched them to actual astronomical events. A firebrand star appearing in the path of Anu, that was likely the comet in Care, visible in the same position they recorded. When these ancient skywatchers wrote about gods clashing in the heavens, they might have been witnessing meteor showers so intense they lit up the night like daylight. And they weren't alone. Halfway across the world, the Chinese bamboo annals described 10 suns appearing in the sky, a phenomenon scholars now suspect was an extraordinary atmospheric effect caused by volcanic ash or ice crystals refracting sunlight. These weren't myths invented to explain the unknown. They were eyewitness accounts of events so spectacular, so terrifying that they reshaped entire cultures. Take the Norse legend of Fimbulwinter, 3 years of endless cold that would precede Ragnarok. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as pure fantasy. Then tree ring studies revealed something startling. Around 536 AD, the entire northern hemisphere suffered 18 months of darkness and freezing temperatures after a cataclysmic volcanic eruption. The ash cloud was so thick it blotted out the sun across continents. Imagine living through that, watching your crops fail, your livestock die, the very color drain from the world, with no explanation except that the gods must be angry. Suddenly, the Norse myths don't sound so far-fetched. Similar stories appear everywhere from the Americas to Australia, often describing the sun growing dim or disappearing entirely. When multiple cultures separated by oceans describe nearly identical events, maybe we should listen. Even the language we use today carries echoes of that ancient terror. The word disaster comes from the Latin for bad star, reflecting the Roman belief that celestial events dictated human fate. In Japan, the term kami refers both to deities and to atmospheric phenomena like storms, because to the ancients there was no difference. The sky didn't just contain gods, it was divine, and when it turned violent, it wasn't just weather, it was wrath. Modern science might explain lightning as electrical discharge, but stand in an open field during a thunderstorm and tell me you don't feel that primal instinct to look up and wonder. The fear might wear different names now: climate anxiety, cosmic dread, but its roots reach back to those first humans who watched the heavens with equal parts reverence and terror. The Babylonians didn't just watch the sky, they decoded it like a divine language. Their astronomers, known as the Watchers of the Sky, spent nights on temple rooftops, etching every anomaly onto clay tablets with the urgency of scribes documenting a war. A flicker in Jupiter's path, a warning of famine, Mars drifting too close to the moon, an omen of invasion, but eclipses those sent entire cities into panic. When the moon blotted out the sun, priests would chant rituals to appease the gods, while commoners banged pots and drums to scare away the dragon they believed was devouring the light. These weren't just superstitions, they were survival strategies. A single eclipse in the year 490 BCE was so feared, it halted a battle between the Medes and Lydians mid-fight, as both armies dropped their weapons, terrified the heavens had turned against them. What's fascinating is how often their metaphors align with reality. Take the phrase, "the sky turned to blood." Modern researchers suspect this could describe intense auroras, visible much farther south than today due to a weaker magnetic field, or perhaps the eerie red glow of sunlight filtering through volcanic ash. Then there's the dragon imagery. Babylonian records mention a great serpent streaking across the sky in the month of Tammuz. Cross-reference that with Chinese astronomers' notes from the same era, and you'll find nearly identical descriptions of a broom star with a serpentine tail, almost certainly Halley's Comet, which passed Earth in 164 BCE. These weren't poetic flourishes, they were precise observations wrapped in the only language they had. But the real shock comes when you realize how much they got right. The Venus tablet of Amasajuka, dating back to the 17th century BCE, tracks the planet's movements with near-modern accuracy. They even noticed Venus's 8-year cycle, a pattern so consistent they used it to predict droughts. And those dragons swallowing the sun. Solar eclipses follow a repeating pattern called the Saros cycle, 18 years, 11 days, a rhythm the Babylonians detected centuries before Greek astronomers gave it a name. Their fear wasn't ignorance, it was the opposite. They saw patterns we've only rediscovered with satellites and supercomputers, patterns that convinced them the sky wasn't just watching, it was judging. Perhaps that's why their legacy endures. When a Babylonian priest looked up, he didn't just see points of light. He saw a living, breathing entity, one that could bless or destroy with equal ease. In a way, we're still chasing that same understanding. We've swapped clay tablets for telescopes, but the question remains, are we truly safer under this sky, or have we just gotten better at ignoring its power? The next time you glance upward, remember you're standing in the footsteps of people who knew the heavens weren't just beautiful, They were alive, and they demanded to be heard. To the ancient Egyptians, the night sky wasn't just a canvas of stars, it was a battleground. Every evening, the sun god Ra would board his golden bark and embark on a perilous journey through the underworld, where the serpent Apophis lay in wait to swallow him whole. This wasn't just a story, it was a cosmic drama played out in real time, one that explained why the sun rose each morning and what might happen if it didn't. The Egyptians didn't just worship the sky, they lived in constant dialogue with it, and their fear wasn't unfounded. What if Apophis wasn't just a metaphor? What if it was their way of describing something real, something that threatened to plunge their world into darkness? Look at the evidence they left behind. The Dendera zodiac, carved into the ceiling of a temple, maps the heavens with startling precision, tracking planets and constellations with near scientific accuracy. But alongside these careful observations are warnings. Texts describe the sky raining fire and stars falling like arrows, phrases that sound eerily like meteor showers or even comet impacts. The Ramesseum papyrus recounts a strange darkness that lasted for 9 days. Could this have been the aftermath of a volcanic eruption, like the one that terrified the Norse? Or perhaps a solar storm, one powerful enough to paint the sky with auroras so vivid they seemed like the tears of gods. Then there's the curious case of the red sun, described in the Book of the Dead. Scholars once dismissed it as poetic license until modern science revealed something fascinating. Around 1200 BCE, a massive volcanic eruption, possibly Iceland's Hekla, spewed so much ash into the atmosphere that the sun appeared blood red for years. Across the globe, cultures from China to Greece recorded the same phenomenon. Coincidence, or proof that the Egyptians, like so many others, were documenting real celestial events wrapped in divine language? Their obsession with cosmic order makes perfect sense when you consider their world. The Nile's floods, the harvests, even the rise and fall of dynasties, all were tied to the rhythms of the sky. A single deviation could mean famine, war, or worse. So they built temples aligned to solstices, designed rituals to appease the gods, and filled their tombs with star maps to guide the dead through the afterlife. This wasn't just religion. It was a survival manual written in the stars. Perhaps that's why Apophis feels so hauntingly familiar today. We've swapped serpent myths for asteroid trackers, but the fear remains the same. In 2029, an actual asteroid named Apophis, no less, will pass so close to Earth it'll be visible to the naked eye. The ancients would have seen that as a sign. Maybe we should too, because whether you call it chaos, climate change, or a cosmic near miss, the message is unchanged. The sky has never been indifferent. And neither should we be. For the ancient Greeks, the sky wasn't just the realm of gods. It was a battlefield where cosmic forces clashed with terrifying consequences. When Zeus hurled his thunderbolts, it wasn't merely a display of power. Those lightning strikes were divine wrath made visible, a reminder that the heavens could turn against humanity in an instant. But the Greeks didn't just fear storms. They watched the night sky with the same dread we might reserve for a ticking time bomb. Comets weren't beautiful curiosities. They were long-haired stars, fiery omens that shook even the bravest warriors. Homer wrote of blazing torches falling from heaven before the fall of Troy, descriptions so vivid they read like eyewitness accounts of a meteor shower. What's striking is how often their myths align with geological and astronomical records. Take the legend of Phaethon, the reckless son of Helios who lost control of the sun chariot and scorched the earth. Scholars now speculate this could describe a massive solar storm or even an asteroid impact event that would have turned the sky into a furnace. The Greeks weren't just spinning tales. They were trying to explain real catastrophes with the only framework they had: gods and monsters. When they spoke of the titans buried beneath volcanoes, were they unknowingly describing the rumblings of Mount Etna? When Perseus turned his enemies to stone with Medusa's gaze, could that be a distorted memory of entire villages fossilized by volcanic ash? Even their temples tell this story. The Oracle of Delphi, where priests interpreted the will of Apollo, sits directly atop a geological fault line, the strange vapors that induced prophetic visions. Now believed to be ethylene gas rising from the earth, the Greeks didn't separate science from spirituality. They saw the convulsions of the planet as messages from the gods. An earthquake wasn't just tectonic plates shifting. It was Poseidon striking the ground with his trident. This world view makes their celestial fears all the more understandable. Unlike modern astronomers who chart comets with detached curiosity, the Greeks lived under a sky that felt actively hostile. A meteor wasn't a space rock burning up harmlessly. It was a weapon flung by angry deities. The Milky Way wasn't a galaxy. It was the spilled breast milk of Hera, a reminder that even the cosmos bore the scars of divine drama. Yet for all their fear, the Greeks also left us a surprising legacy of cosmic curiosity. Figures like Aristarchus proposed a heliocentric solar system centuries before Copernicus. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient computer found in a shipwreck, tracked planetary movements with gears and dials. They feared the sky, yes, but they also studied it with a rigor that borders on reverence. That tension between terror and fascination still defines us today. We may no longer blame Zeus for thunderstorms, but when a solar flare knocks out satellites or an asteroid buzzes uncomfortably close to Earth, that old instinct kicks in. The names have changed: climate change instead of Apollo's wrath, near-Earth objects instead of falling titans, but the question remains the same. Are we any safer under this sky than they were? Or have we just traded one set of myths for another? To the Vikings, the night sky wasn't just a map, it was a war zone. Every flicker of the northern lights might have been the glint of Valkyrie armor, and every thunderclap the sound of Thor's hammer striking down giants. But their most chilling legend wasn't about what happened in the sky, it was about what would happen when the sky itself died. Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods, promised a final battle so cataclysmic it would send the stars tumbling into the sea. The wolf skull would finally catch the sun, his brother Hati would devour the moon, and the heavens would go dark forever. This wasn't just poetic doom-mongering. It might have been their way of explaining something they'd already glimpsed. Consider the eerie accuracy of their descriptions. The Poetic Edda speaks of Fimbulwinter, 3 years of unending cold that would precede Ragnarök. For centuries, historians dismissed it as fantasy. Then ice core samples revealed a climatic nightmare in 536 AD, a volcanic eruption so massive it plunged Europe, Asia, and the Middle East into 18 months of perpetual twilight. Crops failed, frost came in July, the sun shone dimly through a veil of ash just as the sagas described. Suddenly, the Norse obsession with celestial doom makes terrifying sense. They weren't predicting the end times, they were remembering them. Their navigation skills only deepened the mystery. The Vikings sailed thousands of miles using sunstone's crystals that polarized sunlight to locate the sun even on cloudy days. They tracked stars with a precision that still astounds astronomers. Yet these master sky readers also filled their world with omens. A blood-red sunset wasn't just weather, it was the Bifrost Bridge burning. A solar eclipse wasn't an orbital quirk, it was Skoll taking a bite out of the sun. The contradiction is striking. A culture brilliant enough to navigate by starlight, yet convinced those same stars were counting down to oblivion. Perhaps the answer lies in what they couldn't explain. The Norse lived under skies that could turn against them without warning. solar storms might have painted the auroras so intensely they seemed like the spears of fallen warriors. Meteor showers could have been mistaken for the fiery debris of Asgard's walls crumbling. Even their concept of Yggdrasil, the world tree, finds an uncanny parallel in modern cosmology, a vast, branching structure holding the universe together, not unlike the filamentary networks of galaxies we've mapped today. What's most haunting is how these legends echo across cultures. The Aztecs feared the sun might not rise unless fed human hearts. The Maori told of the god Maui slowing the sun's journey to lengthen the days. Everywhere, humans looked up and saw not just beauty but fragility. The Vikings simply took it further. They built entire rituals around staving off celestial chaos, from solstice bonfires to sacrifices meant to strengthen the gods before Ragnarok. We like to think we've outgrown such fears, but watch a solar eclipse today, and you'll see crowds hush as if expecting a dragon to swallow the light. Track a hurricane via satellite, and part of you still wonders if something or someone is steering it. The Norse didn't fear the sky because they were primitive. They feared it because they paid attention, and in an age of climate change and near-miss asteroids, their warnings feel less like myth and more like a flashlight pointed at our own unease. The battleground hasn't changed, only the weapons have. The Aztecs didn't just track time, they counted down to annihilation. Every sunrise was a temporary victory, a sign that Meteor, the sun god, had survived another night of his cosmic battle. Their entire universe hinged on a terrifying prophecy. The fifth sun, the current era, would end in earthquakes and famine, just as the four previous worlds had. But this wasn't blind fatalism. Hidden in their codices are clues that they might have been documenting real celestial disasters. Take the smoking stars described in the Florentine Codex, fiery objects trailing plumes across the sky. Modern astronomers suspect these were comets, perhaps even Halley's, whose 1517 appearance coincided with the Spanish arrival. To the Aztecs, that wasn't coincidence. It was confirmation. The gods had sent a harbinger of doom. Then there's the celestial serpent, Zucotl, depicted as a flaming snake tearing through the heavens. Could this be their way of describing a supernova? In 1054, a star exploded so brightly it was visible for weeks, even in daylight, an event recorded by Chinese and Arab astronomers. The Crab Nebula is all that remains today, but to the Aztecs centuries later, the story might have survived as a warning. When their priests scanned the sky for omens, they weren't just looking for patterns. They were searching for echoes of past cataclysms, convinced history would repeat itself. The Mayans shared this dread, but with a chilling precision. Their long count calendar didn't just mark time, it predicted moments of cosmic reckoning. The famous end date of 2012 wasn't about the world ending as pop culture claimed. It signaled the completion of a 5,125-year cycle, a moment when the heavens reset. What's fascinating is what they tied to these cycles. Inscriptions at Paylink describe Star Wars not as space battles, but as celestial alignments that brought chaos to Earth. Droughts, wars, the collapse of cities, all were blamed on the sky's rhythms. Their observations were shockingly accurate. The Dresden Codex includes tables tracking Venus with near-modern precision, noting its appearances as both morning and evening star. But they also saw it as a harbinger of war. When Venus rose particularly bright, kings postponed battles, fearing the gods' disapproval, and those watery constellations they depicted. Some scholars argue they represent the Milky Way's shifting position over millennia, a slow cosmic clock they believed would one day strike midnight. The terrifying genius of these cultures lies in how they merged science and prophecy. The Mayan observatory at Chichen Itza isn't just a building, it's a machine. Windows align with Venus's extremes, staircases count the days between solstices, and shadows form serpent shapes slithering down pyramids during equinoxes. These weren't just ceremonies, they were early warning systems designed to predict when the sky might turn against them. Today, we'd call it disaster preparedness. When the Aztecs performed blood sacrifices to strengthen the sun, they were acting on the same impulse that has us tracking asteroids or studying solar flares. The language has changed, but the fear remains that one day the sky will stop negotiating and simply strike. The difference is they didn't have satellites or telescopes. All they had were their eyes, their memories, and the unshakable certainty that the heavens kept score. And given what we now know about cosmic impacts and climate shifts, maybe they weren't wrong. Just ahead of their time, in ancient China, the sky wasn't just a celestial stage, it was the emperor's report card. The mandate of heaven wasn't some vague divine blessing, it was a contract written in the stars. If the ruler governed justly, the heavens would remain calm, but let a comet streak across the night or a guest star appear where none belonged, and the message was clear: the emperor had lost favor. These weren't mere superstitions. The Chinese court astronomers kept meticulous records, some of the oldest surviving astronomical documents in the world. When they wrote of red vapors twisting like dragons, modern researchers suspect they were describing intense auroras, possibly caused by solar storms stronger than any we've seen in centuries. Their accounts of colliding suns could align with supernovas so bright they outshone the moon, events like the explosion in 1054 that created the Crab Nebula, visible even in daylight for weeks. What's chilling is how often these celestial warnings preceded real upheaval. The Broom Star of 44 BCE appeared just as the Han Dynasty faced rebellion, its tail stretching across half the sky like a cosmic brushstroke of disapproval. Centuries later, another guest star blazed in 1054. The same year, a devastating earthquake leveled part of the imperial capital. Coincidence? To the Chinese, there were no coincidences. The sky spoke, and wise rulers listened. Their astronomical bureaus weren't just observatories. They were early warning systems staffed by scholars who could lose their heads for missing an omen. But here's what sets Chinese sky lore apart: its terrifying precision. While Europeans saw comets as vague portents, Chinese records note their exact paths, durations, even color changes. The Annals of the Bamboo Books describe a day when 10 suns rose together, a phenomenon modern scientists attribute to atmospheric ice crystals refracting sunlight, the same effect that creates sundogs today. Their descriptions of falling stars like rain match the Leonid meteor storms that still dazzle us every 33 years. This wasn't myth-making. It was data collection with life or death stakes. The sheer longevity of these observations staggers modern astronomers. When a team compared ancient Chinese records of supernova with today's radio telescopes, they found the positions matched perfectly. One 9th century account even details a star that burst like firecrackers before fading over months, a textbook description of a supernova's life cycle. These weren't just poets gazing at the sky. They were chroniclers of cosmic violence, scribbling warnings for future generations. Perhaps no story captures this dread better than the legend of the 10 suns. The Archery was said to have shot down 9 excess suns to save the Earth from burning. Scholars now wonder if this myth preserves the memory of a prolonged drought or even a superflare from our sun, a solar storm thousands of times stronger than usual. The mandate of heaven wasn't just political theater. It was born from the very real fear that the sky could withdraw its grace at any moment, leaving emperors and their people to face the consequences. Today, we track solar flares with satellites and predict eclipses down to the second. But when a freak geomagnetic storm knocks out power grids or a near-Earth asteroid makes headlines, that old instinct kicks in. The Chinese didn't fear the sky because they were primitive. They feared it because they understood its power better than most. Their legacy reminds us that celestial events aren't just light shows. They're mirrors reflecting back our own fragility against the vast, indifferent cosmos. And sometimes, like an emperor scanning the heavens for signs, we still hold our breath. Polynesian navigators didn't just read the stars, they negotiated with them. To sail thousands of miles across open ocean without compasses required more than skill. It demanded an intimate, almost reverential understanding of the sky's moods. The same constellations that guided their canoes could, without warning, become instruments of divine punishment. Take Meteor, the storm god who, according to legend, tore out his own eyes in rage and flung them into the heavens where they became stars. This wasn't mere mythology. When Polynesians described stars falling like tears, they might have been documenting the Perseid meteor showers that still light up August skies today, events that would have been terrifyingly magnified when viewed from a fragile canoe in the pitch-black Pacific. Their oral traditions are filled with these cosmic warnings. The legend of Rota tells of a navigator who ignored celestial omens and provoked the sky to swallow his entire fleet. Scholars now suspect such stories encoded very real dangers, perhaps a sudden typhoon or the kind of rogue wave that still terrifies modern sailors. What's remarkable is how precisely these accounts align with natural phenomena. When Maori elders spoke of Meteor's breath turning the ocean white, they could have been describing the frothing chaos of waterspouts or the eerie glow of bioluminescence during storms. Even their creation myths hold clues. The separation of Ranginui, Sky Father, and Papatuanuku, Earth Mother, isn't just poetry. It mirrors the very real atmospheric divisions these seafarers observed between calm, high-pressure systems and storm-laden fronts. The duality in their relationship with the heavens is striking. By day, they used the sun's path like a compass needle, noting how its angle shifted with the seasons. By night, they memorized the rising and setting points of hundreds of stars, creating mental star maps so accurate they could detect subtle changes over generations. Yet this mastery coexisted with profound humility. Before long voyages, navigators would perform rituals to calm the sky, scattering feathers as offerings to celestial spirits. When clouds obscured the stars, they'd listen to wave patterns against the hull, believing the ocean itself whispered guidance from the gods above. Modern science confirms just how much they got right. The so-called tilapa, flashes of underwater light mentioned in Polynesian legends, are now recognized as deep-sea electrical phenomena that do indeed help pinpoint distant islands. Their stories of fire in the water align with volcanic activity along the Pacific Ring of Fire. Even their taboos against sailing during certain lunar phases make perfect sense when you consider how the moon's gravity affects tides and currents. This wasn't superstition, it was hard-won knowledge passed down through generations in the language of myth, because that's what survived hurricanes and centuries. What's haunting is how these sky lore traditions echo across other seafaring cultures. The Norse had their rainbow bridge Bifrost. The Polynesians spoke of Meteor, a star path guiding souls to the afterlife. The Greeks feared Poseidon's wrath. Pacific Islanders told of Tangaroa stirring the depths with his spear. The similarities suggest something universal, that those who spend their lives at the mercy of wind and wave develop not just respect for the sky, but a visceral understanding of its power. When your days from land with nothing between you and the storm but a wooden hull, the heavens stop being abstract. They become a living, breathing force, one that gives but can also take away. Perhaps that's why Polynesian navigation traditions are making a comeback today. As modern sailors grapple with GPS failures and climate-charged superstorms, they're turning to these ancient sky readers for wisdom. The old star compasses, once nearly forgotten, are being relearned. The chants that mapped the stars are being sung again. It's more than cultural preservation, it's a quiet acknowledgement that the sky hasn't changed. Only our willingness to listen has. To the Lakota, the Thunderbird wasn't just a legend, it was the sky's beating heart. When this colossal being flapped its wings, thunderstorms rolled across the plains. When it blinked, lightning split the earth. But their stories go deeper than simple weather explanations. The great race myth tells of a cosmic battle so destructive it turned the sky black, forcing the animal tribes to wager their very survival on a contest between bird and beast. Historians now wonder if this could describe the aftermath of a volcanic eruption like Mount Mazoma's catastrophic explosion 7,700 years ago, which blanketed half the continent in ash. Imagine witnessing that, the sun vanishing for years, temperatures plummeting, the very air turning to grit, with no explanation except that the heavens themselves must be at war. What makes Native American sky lore unique is its intimate connection to the land. The Pawnee built their lodges to mirror the constellations, aligning smoke holes with the morning stars rising. The Navajo spoke of celestial beings who descended on beams of light, stories that eerily parallel modern accounts of meteor fireballs streaking across the desert sky. And the Thunderbird, its descriptions vary from tribe to tribe, but certain details remain shockingly consistent: wingspans wide enough to blot out the sun, a cry like boulders crashing together, and an uncanny association with sudden storms. Modern meteorologists note that these accounts often coincide with regions prone to violent tornadoes and derechos. Could the Thunderbird have been their way of personifying these terrifying phenomena? The Zuni people took this celestial connection even further. Their Shalako ceremony reenacts the moment when star beings brought agriculture to humanity, descending from the heavens with seeds in hand. Anthropologists have found this myth might encode actual astronomical events, specifically the arrival of the summer monsoon rains that followed the heliacal rising of certain stars. Their entire agricultural calendar was written in the sky, a celestial almanac passed down through generations. But it wasn't all benevolence. The Hopi tell of a time when the sky cracked open, raining fire that forced their ancestors to seek shelter underground. Geological evidence suggests this could refer to the Sunset Crater eruption around 1085 AD, which coated hundreds of square miles in lava and cinders. Perhaps most haunting are the shared stories of celestial wars. From the Iroquois to the Cherokee, multiple traditions describe battles fought in the heavens, sometimes between birds and serpents, other times between star beings that spilled over into earthly disasters. The Omaha tribes, when the stars fell, legend recounts a night when the sky was rent apart, an event scholars now link to the Leonid meteor storm of 1833, when thousands of meteors lit up the night so brightly people thought the world was ending. These weren't just campfire tales, they were survival manuals teaching future generations to recognize the signs of impending catastrophe written in the stars. What emerges from these traditions is a worldview where the sky was never passive. It breathed, it judged, it communicated through storms and falling stars and shifting constellations. When a Plains Indian scout scanned the horizon at dawn, he wasn't just checking the weather, he was reading the mood of the universe itself. That reverence persists today in modern tribal practices, from star knowledge ceremonies to solstice observations. The sky may have lost some of its mystery in the age of satellites, but the lessons remain when the Thunderbird spreads its wings. We do well to pay attention. The year 1347 wasn't just marked by the groans of the dying or the stench of mass graves. It was written in the sky. As the Black Death tightened its grip on Europe, a comet appeared, its tail slicing through the heavens like a fiery whip. Medieval chroniclers didn't mince words. This was no ordinary star. One scribe in Florence called it God's broom, sweeping souls to judgment, while a Parisian monk wrote of a serpent uncoiling above us, its breath poisoning the air. The timing couldn't have been more apocalyptic. As carts piled high with corpses rattled through deserted streets, the comet burned brighter, convincing millions that the plague wasn't just biology, it was divine retribution. But here's what makes this moment so chilling. The comet was real. Modern astronomers have identified it as Comet Negra, a long-period visitor that would have been visible for weeks. To terrified observers, its path seemed to trace the spread of the disease itself, first over the Black Sea where the plague entered Europe, then westward as the death toll climbed. Churches interpreted it as a literal sign from heaven, with some priests claiming to see faces of the damned writhing in its glow. The connection wasn't just symbolic. When people noticed that the comet's brightest appearances coincided with surges in mortality, even physicians began questioning whether the miasma causing the plague had rained down from the tail itself. The psychological impact was catastrophic. In Siena, a group of flagellants marched through comet-lit nights, their self-inflicted wounds mirroring the scars they saw in the sky. In Vienna, panicked crowds burned effigies of the comet, hoping to ward off its influence. And in Avignon, Pope Clement VI, watching from his palace walls, ordered the skies to be scanned daily for new omens. This wasn't just superstition run wild. It was humanity's desperate attempt to find patterns in chaos, to believe that even something as random as bacterial infection must have a celestial architect. What's fascinating is how science now validates parts of their terror, just not in the way they imagined. While comets don't spread disease, their appearance in 1347 coincided with a period of climate upheaval later dubbed the Little Ice Age. Colder temperatures forced disease-carrying rodents into human settlements, accelerating the plague's spread. The comet didn't cause the Black Death, but it did share the stage with the same ecological disruptions that did. The deeper truth lies in the stories survivors left behind. A Welsh chronicle describes the comet's tail splitting into three, like the claws of death reaching down. A German woodcut shows it as a dragon, its jaws swallowing villages whole. These weren't just artistic flourishes, they were trauma responses, attempts to give form to a catastrophe that defied understanding. When the sky itself seems to turn against you, it's easier to blame a dragon than accept the horrifying randomness of a flea bite. That's why this moment still haunts us. Today, we'd call it cosmic horror, the realization that vast, impersonal forces beyond our control can reshape civilization overnight. The Black Death comet wasn't just a medieval panic. It was a mirror reflecting humanity's oldest fear, that the universe isn't indifferent but actively hostile. And in an age of pandemics and climate crises, that mirror might be clearer than we'd like to admit. On a quiet June morning in 1908, something tore through the atmosphere over Siberia with the force of 1,000 suns. Reindeer herders 40 miles from ground zero were thrown off their feet by the blast. Windows shattered in towns hundreds of miles away. The explosion, later estimated at 10 to 15 megatons, nearly 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima, flattened 80 million trees across 800 square miles, their trunks pointing outward like spokes from some monstrous wheel. Witnesses described a column of blue light, bright enough to read by at midnight, followed by shock waves that knocked people unconscious. This was the Tunguska event, and for the first time in modern history, humanity got a taste of what our ancestors feared most, the sky striking back without warning. What makes Tunguska so unsettling isn't just its scale, it's how easily it could have been worse. The explosion occurred over one of the most remote regions on Earth. Had it happened just 4 hours later, the rotation of the planet would have placed it directly above St. Petersburg, reducing the city to smoking rubble. Even more chilling, we didn't see it coming. No telescopes spotted the object, no warning systems existed. One moment the sky was calm, the next it was a weapon. For the indigenous Evenki people living near the blast zone, this wasn't science, it was the return of an ancient nightmare. Their legends spoke of Ogdi, a fire god who occasionally rained destruction from above. When scientists finally reached the epicenter in 1927, they found locals refusing to enter the valley where the devil danced, convinced the area was cursed. Theories about what actually happened still spark debate. The leading explanation, a 60-meter-wide stony meteorite exploding 6 miles up, doesn't fully account for witness reports of multiple explosions or the absence of any crater. Some researchers point to strange electromagnetic disturbances recorded across Europe that night, suggesting a comet fragment rich in ionized gas. Others, like Nobel Prize winner Wilhelm Reich, proposed even wilder ideas involving cosmic orgone energy. But perhaps the most telling detail comes from the trees themselves. Core samples show this wasn't a one-off event. Similar but smaller explosions have left their mark across Siberia for centuries, hinting that Earth passes through streams of cosmic debris more often than we'd like to admit. Tunguska changed everything. Suddenly, those old myths about fire-breathing dragons and falling stars didn't seem so irrational. Governments that once dismissed asteroid impacts as fantasy began funding sky surveys. The event even birthed a new field, planetary defense, with scientists now tracking over 30,000 near-Earth objects. Yet for all our technology, we're not so different from those Evenki hunters staring at the scorched forest. The universe reminded us that day that catastrophe doesn't announce itself, it just arrives. Perhaps that's why Tunguska lingers in our collective memory. It wasn't just a meteor, it was a moment when modern confidence collided with primal fear, when we remembered that the sky doesn't care about our satellites or skyscrapers. The dinosaurs, after all, had no space programs either. As astronomer Carl Sagan once put it, extinction is the rule, survival is the exception. Those words echo through every ancient myth about angry skies, every civilization that built temples to appease celestial forces. Tunguska proved our ancestors weren't foolish for fearing what came from above. They were wise, and if we've learned anything since that morning in Siberia, it's that wisdom often arrives too late. Solar storms don't roar like thunder or streak across the sky like comets. They strike in silence, invisible to the naked eye until it's too late. Yet their power dwarfs anything our ancestors could have imagined. Take the Carrington Event of 1859, when a solar flare so violent erupted from the sun that telegraph operators received shocks from their equipment, some even setting their papers on fire with sparks leaping from the wires. Auroras, normally confined to polar regions, blazed so brightly over Cuba and Hawaii that people could read newspapers by their glow at midnight. Newspapers at the time described it as the heavens on fire, with some convinced Judgment Day had come. But what if a storm like that had hit 2,000 years earlier, without telegraphs to fry or power grids to collapse? How would ancient cultures have interpreted the sky suddenly burning with unearthly light? The terrifying truth is, we've found their answers carved in stone and written on papyrus. A Babylonian tablet from around 660 BCE describes the sky filled with a red glow for 3 nights, a detail matching modern accounts of intense auroral activity. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder wrote of blood-colored clouds seen across Europe in 37 AD, coinciding with ice core evidence of a solar proton storm around that time. Even the Bible's Book of Revelation, with its visions of the sun turning black and the moon to blood, reads like an eyewitness account of a massive coronal mass ejection's effects on the atmosphere. These weren't prophecies, they were records. Today, we understand the mechanics. When the sun's tangled magnetic fields snap, they can hurl billions of tons of charged particles at Earth at millions of miles per hour. Our planet's magnetic field usually deflects them, funneling the energy toward the poles as auroras, but during an extreme storm, that shield buckles. The resulting geomagnetic turbulence induces currents in anything long and metallic telegraph lines in 1859, but today's fiber optic cables, oil pipelines, and electrical transformers. A Carrington-level event now could plunge continents into darkness for months, frying satellites, disabling GPS, and collapsing supply chains. NASA estimates the damage could exceed $2 trillion in the first year alone. The irony is stark. Ancient priests sacrificed animals to appease the sun gods. Modern engineers scramble to install grid protectors before the next big flare. The language has changed, but the fear remains the same. In 2012, Earth narrowly missed a Carrington-level storm when a massive eruption shot through our orbit, a week after we'd rotated out of harm's way. Solar physicists call it the bullet we dodged. Our ancestors would have called it a warning. Perhaps that's why their stories still resonate. The Norse spoke of Skull, the wolf chasing the sun, threatening to devour it at Ragnarök. The Inuit described the auroras as spirits playing soccer with a walrus skull, but warned that whistling at them would invite disaster. Even the name solar wind feels mythic, as if we've unconsciously preserved that ancient sense of the sun as something alive, capricious, and far from tame. The difference is we now know the wolf is real, and it's not howling, it's silent until the moment it strikes. Halley's Comet didn't just streak across the sky, it rewrote history. When it blazed over England in 1066, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle recorded it as a sign in the heavens such as no man had ever seen, its tail stretching like a celestial sword pointing toward the Norman invasion. Just months later, William the Conqueror's forces landed at Hastings, stitching the comet's image into the Bayeux Tapestry as divine endorsement of his claim. But here's what's chilling: this wasn't coincidence. Halley's visit in 373 BCE coincided with the destruction of Sparta by an earthquake. Its 1222 appearance preceded Genghis Khan's westward rampage. Even in 1682, the comet's return aligned with the Ottoman siege of Vienna, a pattern so consistent that by 1910, its next predicted visit sparked global panic, with newspapers warning it might suffocate Earth in poisonous cyanogen gas. The Romans took a different view. When Julius Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, a comet burned so brightly for 7 days that crowds swore it was his soul ascending to join the gods. Augustus later minted coins with the comet's image, cementing the idea that celestial fire could legitimize power. Yet this reverence coexisted with raw terror. Pliny the Elder wrote of comets shaking nations with fear, while Chinese astronomers called them broom stars sweeping away dynasties. The duality is striking. The same phenomenon that crowned emperors also heralded their downfall. What's fascinating is how these interpretations often aligned with real events. The comet of 536 AD, possibly Halley or its fragment, appeared during the worst year in recorded history. Ice cores show a mysterious dust veil plunge the planet into 18 months of twilight, triggering crop failures from Ireland to China. The Byzantine historian Procopius wrote of a star whose light was dim and reddish like stained blood. To cultures worldwide, this wasn't atmospheric science. It was the sky itself weeping. Modern astronomy has demystified comets, but their psychological power lingers. When Halley returned in 1986, spacecraft captured its icy nucleus, a dirty snowball just 15 kilometers wide. Yet even with this knowledge, the sight of its tail arcing across the night can still stir something primal. Perhaps because deep down we remember what our ancestors knew, that the universe doesn't play favorites. The same cosmic visitor that inspired Shakespeare's Stars with Trains of Fire also fueled the hysteria of 1910 when charlatans sold comet pills to ward off its evil vapors. The truth lies somewhere between myth and meteorology. Comets don't cause earthly disasters, but their timing often intersects with humanity's turning points. Like a celestial clock, they remind us how small we are against the backdrop of deep time, and how quickly civilizations can unravel when the sky seems to turn against them. Halley will return in 2061. By then, we may have colonies on Mars and asteroid deflectors. But look up when it comes and tell me you don't feel that ancient whisper. What if this time the omen is real? Auroras don't just dance, they whisper. To the Sami people of Scandinavia, those rippling green curtains were the energy of departed souls, flickering like candle flames in the afterlife. One of their legends warned that whistling under the lights would summon spirits to snatch you away. A taboo born from observing how auroral activity sometimes spiked during magnetic storms, coinciding with unexplained disappearances in the snowy wilderness. Meanwhile, across the Bering Strait, the Inuit spoke of Axonit, the ball game played by spirits using a walrus skull. But there was a darker edge. Elders claimed the lights could swoop down to decapitate those who mocked them, a chilling parallel to modern scientific accounts of auroras producing low-frequency sounds akin to hissing or clapping during intense geomagnetic activity. These interpretations weren't just poetic fancy, they were survival codes. When Viking sagas described the northern lights as reflections off the shields of Valkyries, they might have been noting a real pattern. Modern researchers have found that periods of intense solar activity which magnify auroras often correlate with disrupted weather patterns. A farmer seeing the sky ablaze in unnatural colors might later face a failed crop, reinforcing the belief that the lights were harbingers. Even the Maori of New Zealand, who called auroras Tahanui e Rangi, the great burning of the sky, associated them with fires on the horizon, possibly linking them to distant volcanic eruptions visible through atmospheric refraction. The medieval European view was especially grim. Chronicles from the year 762 describe blood-red warriors battling in the heavens during a supercharged auroral display, coinciding with Charlemagne's brutal Saxon wars. To terrified peasants, the coincidence was divine theater, a celestial mirror of earthly violence. Later, during the Little Ice Age, the lights crept unusually far south, appearing over Rome and Constantinople. Clergy interpreted them as signs of God's displeasure, sparking waves of penitent processions. The irony, they weren't entirely wrong. We now know those dazzling displays were fueled by the same solar minimum that contributed to global cooling and crop failures, proof that the sky really was speaking through the lights, just not in the way they imagine. What's haunting is how these myths converge with modern science. The Finnish Revontulet fox fires legend claimed celestial foxes sprayed sparks with their tails, an uncanny metaphor for solar particles exciting atmospheric gases. The Algonquin warning that auroras could steal your voice finds eerie resonance in radio blackouts caused by geomagnetic storms. Even the Japanese belief that children conceived under the lights would be blessed with beauty or genius hints at an intuitive grasp of cosmic energy's influence, centuries before we understood DNA's vulnerability to solar radiation. Today, we photograph auroras as natural wonders, but stand beneath them when the solar wind howls at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and you'll feel it, the primal awe that made your ancestors fall to their knees. The lights haven't changed, only our illusions of control have. Eclipses didn't just darken the sky, they shattered reality. Imagine standing in an open field when the sun suddenly winks out, the air turns cold, and birds fall silent in mid-flight. To ancient cultures, this wasn't astronomy. It was the universe holding its breath. The Greeks called it aphanismos, the disappearance, and believed it meant Zeus had turned his face away in judgment. Chinese astronomers carved eclipse records into oracle bones as early as 1400 BCE, treating each event like a celestial telegram from the gods. Their solution, a cacophony of banging pots and shouted prayers to scare away the dragon devouring the sun. The Aztecs took it further, offering human hearts to feed the star back to life. But the real terror lay in the unpredictability. Unlike comets or auroras, which might linger for days, an eclipse struck with surgical precision. One moment, the world was bathed in light, the next swallowed by unnatural twilight. The Hittites left behind a prayer begging the gods to return the sun, their words etched with palpable desperation. Whatever sin we have done, we know not. Even civilizations that decoded eclipse cycles, like the Babylonians with their Saros cycle, couldn't shake the dread. Their astronomers might have predicted the darkness, but when the moment came, kings still hid in specially built eclipse houses, fearing the populace would revolt if they saw their ruler powerless under an angry sky. Modern science has stripped away the superstition, but not the awe. We now know eclipses occur when the moon's shadow races across Earth at over 1,000 miles per hour, casting a temporary night no wider than 100 miles. Yet stand in that shadow today, and you'll feel it, the same primal unease that made Inca priests sacrifice unblemished children to Inti, the sun god. The temperature plummets, animals panic. The horizon glows like sunset in every direction, a 360-degree false dawn. It's no wonder our ancestors saw these moments as cosmic resets when the rules of the world hung in the balance. The most haunting evidence comes from dendrochronology. Tree rings from the year 810 reveal global cooling likely linked to a volcanic eruption, but also show a strange, abrupt growth stunt in North American pine. That same year, both European and Arab chronicles describe an unusually long total eclipse, with one account noting the sun perished and was reborn for 2 hours. Coincidence or proof that eclipses often coincided with real disasters, reinforcing their reputation as omens. Even the Bible's book of Amos describes the day, "The sun will go down at noon," a line scholars now link to a total eclipse over Nineveh in 763 BCE, a year Assyrian records cite as plagued by rebellions and famine. Today, we chase eclipses with cameras and protective glasses, but the rituals linger. In parts of India, pregnant women still avoid going outside during an eclipse, fearing radiation might harm their unborn children, a modern twist on the ancient belief that eclipses emitted corrupting energy. In Turkey, some villages fire guns skyward, a vestige of the noise-making traditions meant to free the sun. And when the Great American Eclipse of 2017 crossed the US, social media lit up with jokes about the apocalypse, proof that even now, we can't help but frame the event as a momentary unraveling of order. Perhaps that's the eclipse's enduring power. It reminds us that daylight isn't guaranteed. The sun isn't just a fixture, it's a negotiation, a fragile balance that could, at any moment, be snatched away. Our ancestors responded with drums and sacrifices. We respond with science and selfies, but under that fleeting shadow, the heartbeat quickens all the same. Some fears, it seems, are written deeper than reason. The night of November 13th, 1833, didn't just rain fire, it poured. Across North America, people woke to a sky ablaze with thousands of meteors streaking earthward every minute, so dense they looked like snowflakes in a blizzard. Farmers in South Carolina knelt in their fields, convinced Judgment Day had come. Newspapers reported birds taking flight at the false dawn, while enslaved communities saw the spectacle as a sign of impending liberation. The Leonid meteor storm wasn't just a celestial event, it was a cultural earthquake, reshaping art, religion, and even science, but this was no anomaly. For millennia, meteor showers have been the sky's most dramatic punctuation marks, etching themselves into human memory with trails of terror and wonder. What made the Leonids so unforgettable was their sheer violence. Unlike the gentle Perseids we watch today with lawn chairs and hot cocoa, this was nature's artillery barrage. Witnesses described meteors exploding like cannon fire, leaving glowing trails that lingered for minutes. The Choctaw called it "the night the stars fell," a phrase so evocative it became part of oral histories passed down for generations. Meanwhile, in Alabama, a young Frederick Douglass witnessed the storm while enslaved, later writing how it fueled his belief that the universe itself revolted against injustice. The event even birthed a hymn, "Stars Fell on Alabama," a proof that trauma and beauty often arrive tangled together. Yet the 1833 storm was just one chapter in a much older story. The Mahabharata, an ancient Hindu epic, describes arrows filling the sky like a shower of meteors, suggesting similar events terrified warriors millennia earlier. Chinese astronomers in 902 AD recorded stars raining down like rain, linking it to the collapse of the Tang dynasty, and the Zuni people of the American Southwest still recount a legend about the gods hurling flaming stones to punish humanity, a tale that aligns eerily with geological evidence of a meteorite impact in the Southwest around 2,000 years ago. These weren't isolated fears, they were a pattern written in fire across the centuries. The shift from terror to celebration says more about us than the sky. Today, we flock to dark sky parks for meteor showers, armed with apps that predict peak activity down to the minute, but traces of that old dread linger. When the Leonids returned in 1966, their intensity sparked Cold War panic in Europe, with some mistaking the display for nuclear missiles. Even now, when a particularly bright fireball streaks overhead, emergency lines light up with reports of UFOs or explosions. Our technology may have demystified the mechanics, but our gut reaction remains the same. For a split second, the universe reminds us it plays by its own rules. Perhaps that's why meteor showers still captivate. They're one of the few cosmic phenomena that feel immediate, personal. A crackling fireworks show where the sparks almost singe your skin. The Perseids, the Geminids, the Lyrids each carries its own mythology. The Japanese believed meteors were the souls of the dead racing to rebirth. Norse myths saw them as sparks from Thor's forge. And in West Africa, the Dogon people, renowned for their astronomical knowledge, viewed meteorites as fragments of the Creator's placenta, sacred objects that carried divine energy. Science has given us the vocabulary to explain these light shows: debris trails from comets, particles no larger than grains of sand burning up at 40,000 miles per hour. But stand under a meteor shower today and you'll feel it, that electric jolt when a particularly bright one splits the sky. For a moment, you're not so different from those 1833 farmers staring upward, heart in throat, wondering if the stars have finally come unmoored. The fear may have faded, but the awe remains, and in that shared pause, as the universe scribbles its fiery graffiti across the dark, we're reminded that some wonders don't need to be understood to be felt. In the summer of 1054, A light brighter than Venus erupted in the constellation Taurus, so intense it cast shadows at midnight and remained visible even in daylight for 23 days. Chinese court astronomers, meticulous in their records, called it the guest star, noting its position with such precision that modern scientists later identified it as the supernova that birthed the Crab Nebula. But half a world away, the ancestral Pueblones of Choco Canyon painted the event onto their sacred rock walls. A crescent moon cradling a blazing star, a celestial snapshot frozen in ochre and charcoal. This wasn't just observational astronomy. It was reverence mixed with terror, the realization that stars, those fixed points in the heavens, could suddenly ignite like cosmic torches, rewriting the night sky without warning. What makes supernovas uniquely unsettling is their sheer violence. A dying star doesn't fade quietly. In its final moments, it detonates with the energy of 100 billion suns, briefly outshining entire galaxies. The 1054 event released more light in weeks than our sun will produce in its entire 10 billion-year lifespan. Had it occurred even a fraction closer, say, 100 light-years instead of 6,500, the radiation could have stripped Earth's ozone layer, triggering mass extinctions. The Anasazi and Chinese weren't just witnessing a celestial spectacle. They were staring into the face of a force capable of unmaking worlds. This primal fear left its mark across cultures. The Norse told of the wolf's girl finally catching the sun at Ragnarök, a myth that takes on new weight when you consider supernovas can outshine their host galaxies. Hindu texts describe the god Shiva performing the Tandava, a dance of cosmic destruction that ends epochs, a metaphor strikingly similar to the asymmetric explosions observed in modern supernova remnants. Even the Hopi legend of the blue star Katchina, said to signal Earth's purification by fire, aligns eerily with the blue-white light of a Type Ia supernova, the brightest known stellar explosion. The 1054 supernova wasn't an anomaly. Ice cores from Antarctica show spikes in nitrate levels around the years 1056 and 1080, evidence of earlier supernovas raining radiation down on Earth. A Roman account from 185 AD describes a new star bright enough to rival Jupiter, possibly the supernova that created the faint remnant RCW 86. These events weren't just footnotes in history. They were global phenomena, searing themselves into humanity's collective memory through stories meant to explain and perhaps prepare for the next time the sky turned violent. Modern astronomy has demystified the mechanics. We now know most supernovas occur when massive stars collapse or white dwarfs steal too much matter from companions. But the awe remains. When the supernova 1987 lit up the Large Magellanic Cloud, astronomers detected its neutrinos passing through Earth hours before the light arrived, proof that these explosions aren't just light shows, but universe-shaking events that ripple through space and time. Perhaps that's why supernovas still haunt our imagination. They're reminders that the cosmos isn't static, that even the stars we name constellations will one day perish in fire. The ancestral Pueblones painted their warning on canyon walls. Today, we track potential supernova candidates like Betelgeuse with satellites and spectrographs. The tools have changed, but the question lingers: when the next guest star arrives, will it be a distant wonder or a herald of something far more consequential? The universe keeps its own schedule. All we can do is watch and remember. The year 536 AD dawned with a sun that gave no warmth. Across continents, chroniclers penned eerily similar accounts. The sky turned to ash, daylight dimmed to a sickly twilight, and frost clung to summer crops like a death shroud. Byzantine historian Procopius wrote of a sun that shone like the moon, while Irish monastic records describe a failure of bread so severe it sparked cannibalism. This was no ordinary weather. It was the aftermath of a volcanic cataclysm so immense, its dust veil wrapped the planet for 18 months. Ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica later revealed the culprit, a super eruption, possibly from Ilopango in El Salvador or Alaska's Okmok volcano, that injected millions of tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. The result, global temperatures plummeted, triggering the coldest decade in over 2,000 years. Ancient mythologies suddenly make gruesome sense in this light. Norse legends of Fimbulwinter, 3 endless winters preceding Ragnarök mirror tree, ring evidence showing stunted growth from Scandinavia to Mongolia during this period. The Arthurian wasteland, where crops withered and knights quested for salvation, echoes the desperation of farmers watching their fields freeze in July. Even the Mayan Popol Vuh describes a time when black rain fell and the faces of the sun and moon were hidden, coinciding with archaeological evidence of urban collapse around this era. These weren't allegories, they were survival stories passed down to warn future generations that the sky itself could turn against them. The psychological impact was as devastating as the climate shifts. In Constantinople, Emperor Justinian interpreted the dimmed sun as divine displeasure, doubling down on brutal purges that weakened his empire. China's Liang dynasty crumbled under rebellions sparked by famine, while the plague of Justinian history's first pandemic exploited malnourished populations like a specter in the gloom. When societies already saw comets as celestial daggers and eclipses as cosmic judgment, a years-long twilight didn't just mean hunger, it meant the gods had withdrawn their favor. Modern volcanologists now recognize these volcanic winters as recurring nightmares. The 1815 eruption of Tambora birthed the Year Without a Summer, inspiring Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, as ash-choked skies painted sunsets so vivid they look like blood smeared across old European paintings. But ancient peoples lacked even this basic understanding. To them, the sun didn't just dim, it grew feeble, as if dying. Egyptian texts describe Ro's bark struggling through darkened skies, while Aztec myths tell of Meteor, the sun god, demanding blood sacrifices for strength. These were more than stories. They were attempts to bargain with a universe that had suddenly, terrifyingly, gone cold. What chills modern researchers most is how close we still are to such catastrophes. When Indonesia's Krakatoa erupted in 1883, global temperatures dropped for 5 years. The sulfurous sunsets it spawned inspired Edvard Munch's The Scream, his swirling sky capturing the same existential dread that ancient artists carved into temples. Today, with satellites tracking volcanic plumes and climate models predicting fallout, we've swapped sacrifices for evacuation plans, but the essential fear remains. The sky has never needed gods to be dangerous, it just needs to exhale. Climate upheavals didn't just reshape landscapes, they rewrote human destiny. When archaeologists sift through the ruins of the Akkadian Empire, they find more than crumbled walls. They uncover a climate crime scene. Around 4,200 years ago, dust storms choked Mesopotamia's Fertile Crescent for 2 centuries, turning the breadbasket of civilization into a wasteland. Cuneiform tablets beg the gods for rain, their wedge-shaped letters growing desperate over generations. The large fields produced no grain, the flooded fields produced no fish, one lament reads. But here's what chills modern researchers. Those same tablets describe ominous celestial signs preceding the drought. Flaming stars crossing the sky, the moon wearing a storm cloak. The Akkadians weren't just starving, they believed they'd angered the heavens. This pattern repeats like a grim refrain across history. In Central America, Mayan astronomers tracked Venus with obsessive precision, convinced its movements dictated rainfall. When prolonged droughts struck between 800 and 900 AD, their meticulous calendars couldn't save them. Temples at Tikal bear inscriptions blaming the skies withheld breath, while murals depict gods hurling jade axes, a possible metaphor for lightning-less storms. Modern pollen studies confirm their worst fears. Deforestation and drought turned their heartland into a tinderbox, but the Maya didn't just see ecological collapse. They saw cosmic punishment, a belief etched into the Dresden Codex where scribes linked parched fields to the tears of the moon drying up. The terrifying genius of these ancient sky watchers lies in their intuition. Today, we know abrupt climate shifts often stem from volcanic winters or solar minima forces beyond human control. But without satellites or ice cores, our ancestors did something remarkable. They connected atmospheric changes to celestial patterns. The Egyptian Ipuwer papyrus, describing the chaos preceding the Bronze Age collapse, mentions the sun covered as though by dust and blood in the rivers, eerily matching modern evidence of the Hekla 3 eruptions, global cooling, and Nile algae blooms. Chinese rain prayers from the Zhou dynasty specify celestial conditions for successful ceremonies, including certain star alignments we now associate with monsoon shifts. What's haunting is how these narratives mirror modern climate anxiety. When Greta Thunberg speaks of our house on fire, she channels the same existential dread that made the Akkadians scan the stars for answers. The difference: we've swapped celestial omens for CO2 graphs, yet the emotional arc remains identical. First observation, then alarm, finally desperation. Ice cores from Greenland tell us the Akkadian drought began abruptly within a generation. Tree rings show the Mayas' dry spells hit like hammer blows. These weren't gradual declines, they were cliff edges, moments when the sky's cooperation vanished without warning. Perhaps that's why their warnings still resonate. The Norse Ragnarök prophesied a sun-blackening winter before rebirth. The Hopi spoke of purification by fire after ecological sins. These weren't just myths. They were survival manuals written in the language of celestial metaphor because that's how their authors understood the world's fragility. Today, as wildfires paint our skies orange and hurricanes bear names like ancient wrath gods, we're left with the same uneasy question: are we any wiser or just better at measuring our doom? The ice cores don't lie, the sky never did. It's always been watching, waiting, and sometimes, when pushed too far, answering. The Babylonians didn't just watch the stars, they decoded them like a celestial court transcript, where every planetary alignment was a verdict handed down by the gods. Picture the royal court of Babylon 2,600 years ago. A king pacing his chamber as astrologers unroll clay tablets etched with ominous warnings. If Mars strayed too close to the moon, it signaled war. If Jupiter vanished behind the moon's shadow, famine loomed. These weren't vague predictions, they were state policy. Before launching campaigns or signing treaties, rulers demanded celestial approval, convinced the planets held the keys to victory or ruin. One surviving tablet from the reign of King Sargon II explicitly links a lunar eclipse to the downfall of neighboring Elam. When the moon darkens, the land of the enemy will be destroyed. And it was, but this cosmic bureaucracy wasn't just for kings. Ordinary Babylonians lived in dread of Kakabu Lemnu, evil stars. Birth charts etched on cuneiform tablets reveal how deeply astrology governed daily life. A child born under certain alignments might be abandoned to avoid bringing calamity upon the household. Merchants consulted astrologers before caravan departures, timing journeys to avoid Mercury's confused path, when the planet's retrograde motion was thought to sow chaos. Even architecture bowed to the heavens. City gates aligned with solstice sunrises, while temple ziggurats served as stairways for gods descending to deliver their celestial edicts. The terror behind these practices becomes clear when you realize what they were up against. Babylonian astrologers worked during the Bronze Age collapse, when entire civilizations crumbled under droughts, invasions, and mysterious sea peoples. When the sky itself seemed to turn against humanity, comets flaring, eclipses blotting out the sun, of course they sought patterns in the chaos. Their genius was systematizing that fear. By 700 BCE, they'd compiled the Enuma Anu Enlil, a 70-tablet encyclopedia of celestial omens so precise it included weather forecasts based on lunar halos. This wasn't mysticism. It was early risk assessment, an attempt to impose order on a universe that kept hurling disasters their way. Fast forward to today, and the legacy of that dread still lingers in odd places. Your morning horoscope might casually mention Mercury retrograde as an excuse for missed emails, but the original concept was deadly serious. Ancient astrologers believed retrograde planets literally backtracked on their divine promises, unleashing turmoil. The zodiac signs we idly check in newspapers, those were Babylonian creations, each tied to specific omens. Leo's appearance could signal royal births or rebellions, while Scorpio's rise warned of poisonings. Even the word disaster carries traces of this old terror from the Greek bad star. What's fascinating is how science has validated slivers of their intuition. The Babylonians noted that planetary positions affected tides, a phenomenon we now know stems from gravitational pull. They tracked Venus's cycles with near-modern accuracy, unaware they were documenting the mechanics of a heliocentric solar system. Their mistake wasn't observing connections between sky and Earth. It was attributing agency to those connections, believing Jupiter willed wars rather than simply coinciding with societal unrest. Yet perhaps their greatest contribution was the idea that the sky speaks. If only we learn its language. Modern astronomy owes much to those temple scribes who mapped the stars not out of curiosity, but sheer survival instinct. The difference is we've swapped clay tablets for telescopes, and instead of fearing celestial wrath, we track asteroids and solar flares. But glance at the nervous headlines whenever a planet alignment trends online, and you'll see the old fear flickering back to life. The Babylonians would have understood. After all, they knew the stars don't just illuminate the night, they judge it. Galileo's telescope didn't just magnify the heavens, it shattered an entire worldview. When he trained his lens on Jupiter in 1610 and discovered moons orbiting another planet, the implications were earth-shaking. If celestial bodies could revolve around something other than Earth, then maybe the sky wasn't a divine stage scripted for humanity's benefit. But old fears don't die quietly. Even as Galileo sketched Saturn's strange ears, later understood as rings, his contemporaries called it the witch star, a malefic omen linked to plagues and misfortune. The collision between science and superstition wasn't just academic. It was a battle for the soul of the cosmos. Consider the irony. The same tool that revealed Saturn's rings also fueled new terrors. When astronomers like Christian Huygens mapped the planet's features with increasing clarity, clergymen warned that prying into God's domain would invite wrath. Comets, once seen as divine brushstrokes, became calculable orbits under Isaac Newton's pen, yet their appearances still sparked panic. In 1680, a London pamphlet claimed an approaching comet would set the atmosphere aflame, proving that knowledge alone couldn't extinguish primal dread. The sky was being stripped of its mystery, but not its power to unsettle. Resistance came from unexpected quarters. Tycho Brahe, whose meticulous observations paved the way for Kepler's laws, clung to a hybrid model where planets circled the sun, which itself orbited Earth. Even Enlightenment figures couldn't fully shake astrological thinking. Kepler himself cast horoscopes, insisting that while planets didn't dictate fate, their geometric harmony reflected divine order. The shift wasn't from superstition to science, but from one kind of storytelling to another. The universe became a clockwork mechanism, still awe-inspiring, but now governed by equations instead of capricious gods. Yet the human mind craves meaning. When Halley's comet returned on schedule in 1758, validating Newtonian physics, many saw it not as a triumph of reason, but as proof of cosmic design. The same pattern repeats today. We track asteroids with lasers, yet hold our breath when they pass too close. We map solar storms, yet still describe them with language borrowed from myth. The sun unleashed a fury. The telescope may have demoted the sky from a pantheon to a physics lab, but our gaze upward remains a mix of wonder and wariness. What Galileo began, we're still unraveling. Every time a probe photographs Jupiter's storms or a rover drills into Martian soil, we're continuing that first, defiant act of looking deeper. The rings of Saturn no longer foretell doom, but they've lost none of their majesty. Perhaps that's the real lesson. The universe is far more terrifying and far more beautiful when we dare to see it as it truly is. Not a mirror of our fears, but a frontier waiting to be understood. UFO sightings aren't just a modern obsession, they're the latest chapter in humanity's oldest story. Long before the term flying saucer was coined in 1947, people were describing uncanny objects in the sky. Take the Nuremberg event of 1561, where townsfolk watched in horror as spheres, crosses, and tubular shapes clashed above their city, leaving smoke and blood-red streaks in their wake. The broadsheet published afterward reads like a medieval X-Files episode, complete with illustrations of aerial warfare between mysterious crafts. Modern skeptics dismiss it as a sundog phenomenon, ice crystals refracting sunlight, but the sheer specificity of the accounts raises questions. Why would hundreds of people hallucinate the same intricate battle? And why does their description sound eerily similar to Hindu Vimana myths or Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel from the Bible? Fast forward to 1947, when pilot Kenneth Arnold coined flying saucer after spotting 9 crescent-shaped objects near Mount Rainier moving like saucers skipping on water. Within weeks, reports flooded in worldwide, sparking Air Force investigations and front-page headlines. But here's what's fascinating. Arnold's description mirrors 13th century Yorkshire chronicles that mention silver shields flying in formation, and even the airships reported across America in the 1890s, decades before airplanes existed. The consistency is unsettling. Either humanity has a collective knack for imagining the same unearthly vehicles, or we've been glimpsing something stranger for centuries. Today's UFO narratives have traded celestial chariots for tic-tacs and black triangles, but the fear remains the same. When the Pentagon released those now famous UAP videos in 2020, showing objects defying known physics, the public reaction echoed medieval peasants crossing themselves at comets. Even NASA has joined the hunt, convening scientists to study anomalous phenomena with the same seriousness Babylonians once reserved for eclipse omens. The difference, instead of blaming gods or demons, we speculate about secret military tech or extraterrestrial probes. Yet the emotional core hasn't changed. That sinking feeling when the sky reveals it holds secrets we can't explain. The most striking parallel lies in the psychology of these encounters. Ancient sky chariot stories often emerge during times of societal stress, plagues, wars, collapsing empires. Today, UFO sightings spike during economic crises or geopolitical tensions. The 1950s wave coincided with Cold War paranoia. the 2021 surge aligned with pandemic anxiety. It's as if when earthly chaos overwhelms us, we instinctively look upward for explanations or warnings. The Aztecs saw omens in comets before Cortez arrived. Could our UFO fascination be a similar subconscious alarm bell? Science offers plenty of prosaic explanations: weather balloons, drone swarms, atmospheric oddities. But the persistence of these stories suggests something deeper. Whether it's 16th century Nuremberg or 21st century Nevada, the pattern holds. The sky doesn't just inspire awe. It unsettles. It reminds us that for all our satellites and telescopes, the universe remains vast, strange, and utterly indifferent to our need for answers. The crafts may change shape, but the fear is ancient. And in that sense, every UFO report is less about aliens and more about us. Our brains are wired to find faces in clouds and messages in the stars, not just as whimsy, but as survival. When early humans heard thunder crack over the savannah, recognizing that sound as anger rather than random noise could mean the difference between taking shelter or being caught in the open. This instinct to impose narrative on chaos, known as apophenia, runs deeper than folklore. It's etched into our neurology. Studies show that when shown random dots of light, people consistently perceive intentional movement, a phenomenon researchers call hyperactive agency detection. In prehistoric terms, assuming a rustling bush hid a predator rather than the wind kept you alive. But this same bias, so crucial for survival, also painted the heavens as a realm of sentient wrath. Consider how this plays out in disaster scenarios. When a tsunami obliterates a coastline or a volcano buries a city, the sheer scale of the tragedy defies comprehension. The mind rebels against the idea that such suffering could be meaningless, so it invents a why. The Aztecs blamed earthquakes on the jaguar god Tepeolotl shaking the earth in his subterranean lair. The Greeks saw Poseidon's trident in every tidal wave. These weren't primitive fantasies, they were psychological coping mechanisms. Assigning agency to catastrophe transforms helplessness into a negotiation. If floods come because the gods are angry, then sacrifices and rituals become a form of control. It's no coincidence that cultures separated by oceans developed similar sky myths. The human brain, faced with the same terrifying unknowns, arrived at the same desperate solutions. Modern psychology reveals another layer, the just world hypothesis. We want to believe the universe is fair, that suffering is earned rather than random. This explains why eclipses were often interpreted as divine punishment for societal sins, from Babylonian kings hiding in eclipse houses to Inca priests offering child sacrifices to restore the sun. The alternative, that celestial events unfold indifferent to human morality, was too destabilizing to accept. Even today, when disaster strikes, people instinctively ask, why us? As if the cosmos keeps moral ledgers. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of sky fear is how it mirrors our relationship with power. Ancient sky gods weren't just powerful, they were capricious. Zeus wielded lightning bolts on a whim. The Norse Thor was as quick to slaughter giants as to forget his own strength. These deities embodied humanity's visceral understanding that the forces shaping our lives are often unpredictable, disproportionate, and utterly unconcerned with fairness. A farmer might labor for years on fertile soil, only to see his crops flattened by a hailstorm. Blaming the sky's whims made that injustice comprehensible. In a world where kings and conquerors behaved with similar unpredictability, the heavens became the ultimate metaphor for arbitrary power. The legacy of this thinking lingers in subtle ways. Insurance policies still refer to hurricanes as acts of God. Sports fans blame bad luck when rain cancels a crucial game. These phrases reveal our stubborn tendency to anthropomorphize the impersonal. Science may have replaced thunder gods with atmospheric physics, but the emotional response remains. When SpaceX's Starship exploded during a test launch in 2023, social media lit up with jokes about the rocket gods being angry, proof that even in the age of astrophysics, we still instinctively reach for celestial blame. What's truly remarkable is how these ancient fears shape modern behavior. Studies show people are more likely to buy lottery tickets when primed with stories about luck or fate. During solar eclipses, hospitals still report surges in panicked calls from pregnant women fearing radiation, a direct descendant of the Aztec belief that eclipses could deform unborn children. The rituals have changed, but the underlying anxiety hasn't. We've swapped sacrificial altars for lucky socks and weather apps, yet the fundamental urge remains to find meaning in the indifferent drift of the cosmos. The sky was humanity's first oracle, its first adversary, and its first mirror. In its vastness, we saw our smallness. In its storms, our fragility. Every lightning bolt interpreted as divine wrath, every comet read as an omen, was really a reflection of our own psyche projecting order onto chaos, seeking control where none existed. The stars haven't changed, only our understanding of them has, and in that gap between ancient terror and modern knowledge, we find something profoundly human, the unyielding need to look upward and whisper why. Our ancestors didn't fear the sky because they were primitive. They feared it because they were paying attention. Every eclipse that sent Babylonian kings into hiding, every comet that made Norse warriors clutch their amulets was a lesson etched in survival. These weren't just stories, they were the first disaster preparedness manuals, written in the language of myth because that's what lasted. When the Maya tracked Venus not just as a planet but as a harbinger of war, they were recognizing patterns we've only recently quantified, that prolonged droughts, often linked to celestial cycles, could topple civilizations. Their superstitions were data science in narrative form. Take the universal flood myths. From Gilgamesh to Genesis to the Aboriginal Dreamtime, cultures worldwide preserved tales of catastrophic deluges. For centuries, scholars dismissed them as allegory until geologists found evidence of massive post-ice age flooding 12,000 years ago. The Black Sea, once a freshwater lake, suddenly swallowed 6,000 square miles when the Mediterranean burst through. Survivors wouldn't have known about melting glaciers or rising seas. All they saw was the sky opening up, the waters rising, and the world they knew vanishing beneath the waves. Their stories weren't fiction, they were trauma transcripts. This sky wisdom pulses through modern crises. When Hurricane Katrina shattered New Orleans in 2005, sociologists noted how survivors described the storm in almost mythic terms. The water just kept coming, like judgment. The same instinct that made the Sumerians blame floods on angry gods now makes us personify hurricanes, giving them names as if they're conscious adversaries. The difference is we have radar instead of divination, but the emotional response remains identical, a humbling realization that for all our technology, nature writes the final rules. The real genius of ancient sky fears lay in their preventative power. The Puebloans didn't just pray for rain, they built intricate water catchment systems under their cliff dwellings, learning from generations of drought encoded in their sky serpent legends. The Vikings, convinced the northern lights were Valkyrie armor, avoided winter voyages when auroral activity spiked where they were dodging geomagnetic storms that disrupt navigation. Even today, farmers in Nepal plant crops according to traditional lunar calendars that uncannily align with soil moisture cycles. These weren't blind rituals. They were time-tested adaptations, wrapped in celestial symbolism to ensure they'd never be forgotten. Perhaps the most urgent lesson is their humility. Ancient skywatchers knew they weren't the center of the universe, a truth we've intellectualized but rarely internalized. When Polynesian navigators apologized to the stars for human arrogance, or when Cherokee elders spoke of listening to the sky's breath, they were acknowledging a cosmic balance we've spent centuries ignoring. Now, as megafires turn our sunsets blood red and space junk clutters the heavens, their reverence feels less like poetry and more like prophecy. We stand at a strange crossroads. Our telescopes map galaxies billions of light years away, yet we still gasp when the auroras dance. Our satellites predict eclipses to the second, but crowds still fall silent under totality's shadow. The old fears have shapeshifted into climate anxiety, asteroid tracking, the nervous jokes about angry weather gods when another record storm hits. The sky hasn't changed, only our capacity to understand it has. And in that gap between ancient terror and modern knowledge, there's wisdom. That sometimes the most rational response to the cosmos isn't control, but respect. Our ancestors would have understood. The question is, will we remember in time? From Babylonian eclipses to modern solar storms, humanity's fear of the sky reveals a profound truth. We've always been at the mercy of forces beyond our control. But understanding these fears and the real phenomena behind them can empower us. The next time you gaze upward, remember, the sky that terrified our ancestors is the same one we're now learning to navigate. Let's honor their awe while embracing our curiosity. There's something humbling about realizing how little has changed. The Babylonians trembled at eclipses because they didn't know when the sun would return. Today, we calculate these events centuries in advance, yet crowds still gasp when daylight vanishes. The Norse feared Fimbulwinter's endless cold. Now we track climate patterns via satellite, but the dread of a shifting planet feels eerily familiar. Our tools have evolved, but the sky's power to humble us hasn't. What's different is our capacity to respond. When a solar storm brews, we don't sacrifice bulls to appease the sun god. We shield power grids and reroute satellites. Asteroids aren't omens, they're math problems, their trajectories plotted by algorithms. Yet in that shift from superstition to science, we risk losing something vital. The raw, gut-level awe that made our ancestors see the sky as alive. The challenge isn't just to master the heavens, but to do so without extinguishing the wonder that first made us look up. Think of it like this. Every time a meteorologist predicts a hurricane's path, they stand on the shoulders of priests who once read storms as divine wrath. Every SpaceX launch carries echoes of the first humans who dared to ask why the stars move. Our ancestors may have misunderstood the mechanics, but their urgency was right. The sky does demand our attention, not because it's angry, but because it's indifferent. And in a universe that doesn't care if we survive, awareness is our only edge. So keep looking up, but not just with telescopes. Glance at the moon and remember the Maya, who plotted its cycles with obsidian mirrors and cocoa bean math. Watch a thunderstorm and recall the Norse who heard Thor's chariot in every rumble. Their stories weren't wrong. They were the first drafts of our survival manual, written in the language of myth because that's what lasts. The sky hasn't softened, but thanks to those who feared it first, we've grown wiser. If these ancient sky watchers could see us now, they'd likely marvel at our satellites, but they'd also nod in recognition. Because some truths transcend time. The universe is vast, we are small, and the only real mistake is assuming we've outgrown the need to wonder. So share your thoughts below, and next time you step outside, take a moment to glance upward. The stars haven't changed, but how we see them, that's the story of us all.